Renegade Immortal EP84. When Beast, reveal yourself. Calm down, calm down. We didn't know your identity before. We really didn't know. How miserable was the scarred man who crippled the undead. He was smashed to pieces by the Wind Beast. Continuing from the last episode, as everyone knows, in the original Renegade Immortal, after the undead had his limbs crippled by the Fire Cloud Stronghold bandits, he was locked in the water prison. But unexpectedly, there was rich spiritual energy within the water prison. However, there was a thin membrane on the undead's body, constantly preventing the absorption of spiritual energy. Any trace of spiritual energy that entered his body would be quickly expelled by the membrane. Meanwhile, in the stronghold, a burly, towering man was sitting in his room. In front of him lay a gray pouch. But when the man picked up the pouch, he found it had no weight at all. "What is this?" With a surprised look, he began to tear at it with both hands, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't tear the pouch open. A treasure. This is a real treasure. That damn kid, I don't know where he got such a treasure. I have to go ask him. With that thought, he stood up and headed straight for the dungeon behind the stronghold. "Greetings, Chief." Where's that ugly kid we bought?" In the north cell." "Open it." "Yes, yes, yes." However, the moment the door opened, a young man with a face full of scars floated out from the iron cage. Seeing this, the large man's eyes widened, and he quickly reacted, turning to flee. But he had only taken 2 steps when an invisible large hand firmly grabbed him. The large hand squeezed gently, and the large man didn't even have time to scream before he exploded into a mass of flesh and blood. At the same time, the pouch on his chest flew away from his body and landed in the young man's hand. That's right, this young man was the undead. Under the pressure of the spiritual energy in the water prison, the undead had finally broken through a gap with all his might, allowing him to possess a trace of faint spiritual energy. However, this time, the spiritual energy was too scarce, so much so that it was almost exhausted after killing the 2 men. Therefore, the undead quickly injected the remaining spiritual energy into the storage pouch. Suddenly, a cyan light flickered on the storage pouch. Then a dark light flew out from it, transforming into a mosquito the size of a small hill in midair. It glared at the small fry nearby. Witnessing the scene, they were so scared they wet their pants. After the Wind Beast appeared, it immediately let out a deafening roar. Because it was connected to the undead's mind, seeing its master so weak, how could it not be enraged? So, without waiting for the undead's command, it stared at the on the ground. In a very short time, the small fry were turned into skeletons. Because after the Wind Beast's attack, the spiritual energy within the undead was completely depleted. But as long as the Wind Beast was by his side, his safety was guaranteed. Although the Wind Beast's roar alerted the entire stronghold, and everyone picked up their weapons and rushed from all directions, as soon as they ran a few steps, they saw the gigantic mosquito, like a small hill. Immediately after, everyone's legs began to tremble uncontrollably. At this moment, Wang Lin was enduring the throbbing pain from the bones in his limbs, but his eyes were exceptionally cold. His gaze locked onto the scarred man. Then, the undead simply pointed at him gently, and the Wind Beast roared out. But this time, it didn't use its breath attack, but instead, with its massive body, it charged fiercely. After a loud bang, the scarred man instantly turned into a pile of minced meat. At this point, everyone in the stronghold dropped their weapons, their faces filled with extreme terror. But just then, a scholar stepped out from the crowd and bowed deeply to the undead. "Please, Immortal, calm down, calm down. We didn't know your identity before. We really didn't know. What country is this?" "This is the northern part of the Pillar Kingdom. So this is the northern part of the Vermilion Bird continent." The undead then ordered them to drain the water from the water prison. As everyone knows, in the original Renegade Immortal, the undead, in the water prison of Fire Cloud Stronghold, not only obtained a trace of spiritual energy, but also released the Wind Beast. But the T intent and the seal left in his body still remained. To break the seal, the undead chose to continue cultivating in the water prison. However, after a long time, seeing that Wang Lin hadn't moved, the stronghold members decided to sneak away. After all, no one wanted to be bitten by the giant mosquito. But just as they were escaping the stronghold, Wang Lin's voice rang out again. No one from the stronghold is allowed to leave. Just like that, Fire Cloud's stronghold fell into unprecedented tranquility. So much so that during this period, the passing caravans nearby were quite surprised. After all, the usually tyrannical Fire Cloud 18 heroes hadn't shown their faces for 2 consecutive months. One day, the undead slowly opened his eyes in the deep pool. Although the injuries to his physical body had healed, the tea intent and the seal still showed no signs of loosening. 2 months, and I've only recovered to the 2nd level of chi condensation. This seal, combined with the intent, is simply too powerful. I must find a place with richer spiritual energy. With that thought, he sank deeper into the pool. Soon, the undead reached the bottom of the pool. To his surprise, beneath the pool was a large formation. And within the formation, there was a skeleton fixed to it. The undead immediately recognized that the formation's purpose was to seal the skeleton. Seeing this, the undead didn't act rashly. Instead, he chose to swim upwards and leave this place. But just then, a light suddenly flickered within the undead's storage pouch. Then a mysterious scroll suddenly broke free from the storage pouch. The undead's eyes instantly focused. The scroll opened automatically, revealing a dark, gloomy curtain within. At the same time, the skeleton at the bottom of the water prison suddenly crumbled into a pile of black ash. But strangely, it didn't dissolve in the water. Instead, it was directly absorbed into the scroll. This change happened extremely quickly. Wang Lin reached out his right hand, grabbed the scroll, and decisively rushed out of the water. After surfacing, Wang Lin was bewildered. He still couldn't understand the secrets of this scroll. The undead's eyes flickered, and he withdrew his thoughts. Because the most important thing right now was to recover his cultivation. So he closed his eyes again and began to meditate. Time flew by. 3 months passed. Since the undead left the Chu state, more than half a year had passed. It was now deep winter in the Pilla Kingdom. The bandits in the stronghold hadn't gone down the mountain for half a year. Fortunately, the food reserves on the mountain were enough to sustain them through the winter. During these 3 months, the undead's cultivation had recovered to the 6th level of chi condensation. During this time, the wind beast never left the undead's side. But it would occasionally look into the distance. Indeed, that direction was where the Chu state lay. Although the wind beast and Leiwa didn't get along usually, the long separation made it miss her. One day, the undead suddenly opened his eyes. He then took out a piece of immortal jade from his storage pouch. It turned out that the undead had been using the spiritual energy from the top-grade spirit stones to break through the seal within his body for these past few months, but all had ended in failure. If I devour this immortal jade, it's no different from taking poison. But now, I'm deeply afflicted by the seal and the tea mirror, which can also be considered a kind of poison. Fighting poison with poison might be the fastest way to break the current deadlock. With that, Wang Lin broke off a thumb-sized piece of immortal jade and put it into his mouth. The moment the immortal jade entered his mouth, a vast and boundless immortal power raged within Wang Lin's body. Its ferocious momentum was like a bursting river. But with his past experience in devouring immortal jade, Wang Lin's eyes were exceptionally calm as he faced this power this time. He focused all his attention, guiding the immortal power to fiercely impact the seal and the tea mirror barrier within his body, time and time again. However, each impact not only caused the undead's body to tremble, but even the place where he sat began to crack due to the continuous impact of the immortal power within his body. After a long time, finally, a few crisp cracking sounds emanated from within the undead's body. It was as if something solid was breaking apart. At the same time, the tea leaf mark on his face, about 1/10 of it, began to slide down his cheek. Although the undead's face was pale and blood hung from the corner of his mouth, his eyes were exceptionally determined. How will the undead recover his cultivation step by step? Please like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. We'll continue in the next episode.